or some of the 2022, 2023 goals that we had set aside. We spent a lot of time on our Franklin Farrell project, and I didn't want us to forget all the rest of the goals that we had that we really want to work on. And so this is kind of a chance for us to get an update and to discuss what we want to do, maybe if we, and so that I know we won't have much time through the master plan process once that starts, but I would still like to continue to push some of these things along if possible. So I'm gonna give it to Jamie.
Thanks, Madam Chair. After you, Madam Chair, to the committee and the folks watching at home. Just realized the TV isn't on over here. Usually I look at what's going on, but that's okay.
I can see me. So you don't want to see me.
I just have to turn it on. So, in the memo for those watching at home, there's a memo there with some updates, and I tried to put in some details of where things stood. Obviously, as we look at the list, I hope everybody is really proud of a lot of the accomplishments here. Mm-hmm. There's a lot done. And I think most of the hardest stuff that's on the goals has been done, particularly around Franklin Farrell zoning. We're not done forever, but we've obviously spent as a committee and a staff probably a better part of the last year focused on those initiatives. What I did put in here, Madam Chair, is also some of the bylaw or some of the goals that we haven't, as a group, the committee hasn't really discussed yet. Mm-hmm. And so those are actually labeled on the agenda, so if folks wanted to talk about them, we could. Let's see, we got May, June, July, August, September, October, so we got about 6 months.
We have a lot of time.
Before the November election. There is a lot of time. Yeah. The capital subcommittee process is largely done for right now. Mm-hmm. So the capital budget, I don't know about the budget subcommittee, possibly one more meeting maybe before the budget hearings in a few weeks, but traditionally that hasn't happened and there's nothing scheduled. So as far as I can see, the only other competing demands for time are really, the Davis Thayer Committee, which hasn't been appointed yet. I haven't had time to really get through all that. But other than that, the EDC should be able to have some more meetings before future council meetings. And if there's a really long debate that needed, we could obviously set up an alternative date on a Wednesday. But I think we're looking from the group in the discussion, and the staff are here as well, of just where to prioritize next. Mm-hmm. Does the EDC want to stay on a lot of the housing or zoning related stuff, even though the master plan's kicking off, I think, in a month? I do worry a little bit about too much confluence of all that going on, of discussions at one meeting and then carrying over into another. But if there are things that folks want to do, we can easily do them. And I would my last comment would be, I would point out, I think, from the rest of the members of the council, I think at least having some sort of progress or discussion on each of the remaining items and goals, makes some sense. And we can talk about those tonight, or if the group wants to prioritize them in the future, we certainly have some open air here. So happy to answer any questions, obviously, on any of the updates. But, as I look out, it's like we always say, Councilor Hamlin, sometimes it always feels like a lot of work and we text a lot. But then when you look back a little, you're like, whoa, there was actually quite a bit done. And there's quite a bit moving along. Like the New Style project on here, I know last meeting I announced the $100,000 in ARPA funds to actually start literally doing some of the remediation. Mm-hmm. And Brian's applying for an EPA grant because they've never had more money at the EPA for this brownfield stuff. So that's another, we've done a lot of work on New Style. We've probably done more work on New Style in the last 2 years than we've ever done before. So that's really good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you to Brian.
Yeah. It's really quite a lot of research and connection to the grants and stuff. So happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure everybody will have a good discussion.
Yeah, I know that we definitely want to continue some of the zoning issues, but maybe we do it in the master plan, and then we're in that whole process. But there are some things definitely I know people have talked about a lot at the whole council level, is like the sidewalk removal. I mean, snow removal, not the sidewalk removal, but the snow removal from the sidewalk.
that's
Sorry
a
about that.
problem.
That's another thing, yeah. And I remember that Brutus had put together a map or something already, right, for us to discuss that. So I don't know if you guys, if you have any other things. I mean, to me, it's like I'm super, super interested in the home occupation business bylaw, and I know that's going to take a lot of time, so, and to do it right, I think we need to take the time, but if we do it a little bit at a time. So, Glenn?
The 5G local permitting bylaw, I guess I'm just kind of looking for clarification.
Yeah.
That's really, that's really just a policy thing, right? Because at the current moment, I believe logic dictates with just 4G as for whatever contract or bylaws or policies that we have. But what would need to significantly change to meet any extra requirements for 5G? I know a lot of the 5G equipment is actually more local, because from my understanding of how the infrastructure works, their antennas will actually be allowed to be closer to the neighborhoods. So they're going to have more antennas, they're going to have more real estate that they're taking up in the town. And there have been, I don't know, Kobe or Patrick or yourself have heard that there has been some people who have issue with 5G in the sense that their antennas can potentially, again, like anything, there's no real proof, cause health problems.
Yeah.
And that's kind of I think that's kind of a topic of discussion that I think the EDC would be fair to delve into.
Okay, so, well, it's like, what does this entail, I guess, right? Because
Yes,
that's what you
what's-
want to
what's
know.
the general, yeah, what would it, how would we approach this? I do think the public should definitely have some input into their feelings about having 5G come into their neighborhoods. I mean, don't get me wrong, from an infrastructure perspective, it makes complete sense if you can take the modems, because that's basically what they are, and move them closer to the neighborhoods, because now they have a wider spread of coverage. And it actually helps their coverage, because if they have, I don't know, let's say it goes from 1 or 2 antennas in the town to say 15.
Okay,
So if that goes to 15 local antennas, that benefits them in the sense that if one goes out, they're only losing a smaller section of the infrastructure. So it's not like it affects a large swath of the town, it only affects a few neighborhoods and doesn't affect the whole town. But one of the problems that's arisen as a potential problem, I have no proof about it, is that by moving these antennas closer to the neighborhoods, you're ultimately putting this point of transmission closer to people.
right,
So
right. And I assume that the permitting by law would have all these kind of things taken into account.
So through you, Madam Chair, so Councilor Jones raises a bunch of the points. When this goal was originally put on 4 years ago, this was pre-FCC decisions on 5G. There's kind of a slew of things. The original goal was to make sure that they just didn't show up on public trees and property,
Right.
and that there was like a general knowledge, at least from this town, that like you can't regulate it and say we're going to charge you $5,000 per permit to put up a 5G. Like that's blatantly illegal from the FCC standpoint, which is all regulated by the federal government. What you can do in other towns is said, okay, for $10, we just want to know, not minor fee, we just want to know where they are.
Where it is. Right.
We're not opposed to them. It's funny how people work, right? I think the overwhelming demand is for, based on when the power goes out and people lose their Wi-Fi for a half hour, it's very clear that streaming and 5G is critical to the majority of if not everybody's life, right? We went through this during the pandemic too with remote learning and all this stuff. And so our approach was trying to be very simple and say, like, here's the basic regulation. This does require a little bit of research. It definitely requires the staff and as well as Attorney Sorrell and possibly our cable negotiation council who are experts in this. There are some other cities and towns that have just chinched away at it a little bit, a few here. It's not a big deal because obviously we're getting overwhelmed with everything else on the agenda in Massachusetts. And this has kind of just fallen down during the pandemic where they're just kind of popping up wherever the companies need them to go. My guess is that when the new deputy comes on, this will be on their plate. To just try to corral a little bit of the research and see like maybe a review of where we're at in Massachusetts on these issues. I'd like to just at least give the community like at least an update, like at least where this 5G, where the installations are, what's the latest trends. We may realize that we don't need a bylaw, right? That could be the end result as well.
Right.
It may just be what it is what it is. But originally there was a lot of nervousness, and I think we had some here legitimately too. Of like, wait, are these just going to show up in the King Street Memorial Park on public
Right,
property?
right.
Like,
And we don't know, and we'll never know where they are.
and
They're
if
just
we
gonna
didn't
put 'em
start
up.
early,
Yeah,
like then we wouldn't. Maybe it would maybe just kind of be like the horse is out of the barn and we can't catch up. And I got to admit, like obviously we've been also busy. I mean, I know there's a few cells in town, but I couldn't possibly know if there's
They're
20 or like 100.
Yeah, they're small.
You know.
Yeah.
And so.
Relative.
so did they put them on
Telephone.
the top of the telephone poles?
Mostly on the
right?
top of the telephone
It's their poles.
Theoretically, we don't know that, although in Franklin it's a little easier because National Grid doesn't own a majority of the poles.
Okay,
But
right.
not in every town, like where I worked in Hopkins before, NSTAR and a couple of other, there was like 3 utility companies that shared
They have
ownership
to
of the
lease
poles. Comcast and NSTAR, I think, split the ownership,
Yeah.
which is really difficult. So in Franklin, actually, it might, that's to my point, like it may actually prove to be not a big issue because we do have one electricity company, basically for 99.9% of the town. And so Eversource has just one road up in Populatic where they're the electric company.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I say 99.9%. And we may realize this is not needed, but I'd like to at least, I think this would be the least important goal on my level, just to get another staff member when the deputy TA comes on board, to have them just kind of power off some research.
Look at it.
To
Yeah.
give a report back and say, hey, we looked at it, we don't need this, we don't need this, we need maybe a little bit of this.
So what's bad about not knowing where they are? I guess is like to regulate it. What is
What would be a concern?
yeah, if we didn't regulate it?
If we didn't regulate it, I think mainly the concern would be public property. But then I think, as Glenn points out, I think there's a very small population of people that are worried about, Big
Radiation.
Brother. They're worried about having one outside their house. They're,
Right.
kind of the same general NIMBY-ish type thing. Like, oh, they're gonna put a sewer pump station near me. Like, why are we doing that? Like, just I think more of like how do we respond to citizens who may be concerned about the cancer issue,
Right.
or just a variety of others, and say, like, at least we're on top of it. But other than that, by this point, I'm not sure exactly what the concern might be, other than, maybe down the line, do you have 5G cells on every pole? And I'm not sure that's a problem, but quite frankly, I think that people are willing to sacrifice whatever health risk it is to have streaming.
Well, yeah.
To have streaming, like when the Netflix kicks out and the kid, and the family can't watch the movie, I think that's a greater pain than possibly whatever the health risk is.
I will say
It's out
it's
there.
important for business as well.
It's important, very important for
Right.
business.
Counselor Jones.
Just one question to you and actually to my fellow councils. Would it be juxtaprudent to maybe suggest to the council or even to this committee to ask like Verizon or the providers who install this equipment to maybe give a presentation on what 5G is, why they locate certain routers?
Why do they want to put them up all over the place?
Well, yeah, exactly. Just kind of give the public a little bit of education as to what they know about any potential health risks or any potential known issues that 5G might present. So at least just to inform the public, I know what they're going to say. They're going to say there are no health risks associated with 5G
Right.
because they're the company selling it. But
Right.
at least just
Because we don't know yet.
But at
Right.
least
Oh,
just
they
to
know
kind of
now,
give
telling us.
some presentations to the council and the community as a whole, so everyone understands that this technology is going to continue to grow in the town of Franklin, and this is why, and this is where, and this is the potential impact of
Yeah. I always think more information is better.
Yes.
But maybe when the deputy starts, they can put something together, like
Yeah, and just kind of circle back.
find some information.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do is like that one is not high priority at all, right?
Great.
So we can cross that one off, right? I mean, that can become the deputy administrator can find out that information and then they can give a presentation to the whole council, right, for people's information.
Summary report,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Some sort of
right?
update, yeah. Maybe
Okay.
like in October is like, just to get it under the wire to say we gave it some attention.
Yeah.
So when we close out the goals, you know, it wasn't like we lost one,
Say
you know?
complete. Right.
And actually, I'm kind of curious, maybe like others too, like I just have lost sight. I haven't read a lot on this in a long time.
Yeah, I
I'm
wonder
just like kind of curious like where it is, you know?
Yeah.
And it's curious. It's like I'm curious to know like how many do you have to put to
Right.
get the amount of
Coverage that they're looking
the
for.
coverage, right?
Can you
Like
see
we
them?
don't even know, right?
But you see them around town?
Yeah.
Where are they?
I believe there's one right on Oak Street, just by the crosswalk.
I was gonna say, I bet Glenn knows where they all are.
Not all of them. I know a few of them.
Someone-
are.
Because you look, some on church towers.
I look for those things.
Yeah. And-
But they wouldn't typically put them in the church towers because they're a local router. They only actually go several blocks.
Ah,
They're
okay.
They're not designed.
It's not like
to
a
have
cell
wide-
phone tower,
Okay.
like.
No, but it
like-
actually gives better coverage.
Okay,
Because the cell phone tower, the further you get away from a cell phone tower, the worse reception is.
Mhm.
And depending on where those cell phone towers are located, if you're like geometrically triangular in the middle of three towers, you're gonna have really bad coverage. So the closer you get to the tower, the better your signal is. So what this does is this puts a local antenna in more locations, so that when you go from location to location, you're basically overlapping.
right.
So
You
you have a
travel through
larger
all the different,
You have a larger
Routers.
spread
Yeah.
in the neighborhood, so that when you can basically go from one end of the town to the other end of the town, depending again where the infrastructure is located, with almost a continuous level of bars, because they're
Okay.
so spread out, so that but it also, from a police perspective, I don't know if you know this, or knew this or not, Jamie, but from a geo-positioning system perspective, it's much easier to actually pinpoint somebody because the routers are closer together.
right,
So the ability to triangulate somebody based on the location of the infrastructure, since the infrastructure is closer together, you get a better geo-position because you're closer to an antenna, instead of having antennas so far apart and it has to
that makes
triangulate that
sense.
position.
Yeah,
But you can basically pinpoint anybody to within a dime, which, you know, in most cases you probably already do with satellites, but it basically helps with coverage across the board, which is why they're pushing it. As far as signal is concerned, in other words, the bandwidth that's available, it's still the same bandwidth, it's just putting it closer to the customer, if that makes sense.
It made sense, yeah. No.
Councilor Frangillo, do you have any questions about that or any other things we should discuss?
Yeah, thank you. I also would put it as my lowest priority of those there. I feel good about empowering the deputy director, what are we calling them? TA, to,
Deputy Director, Deputy Administrator, right?
Deputy
We're all the same,
administrator,
it's okay.
to
DTA.
look into it and see what other communities are doing and
DTA.
get back to us to see if it's
Yeah.
worth, sort of re-raising as a priority. I do have a question about the marijuana overlay district and
Yeah.
just sort of what raised that. But in general, of the four in front of us, I would place my priority in this order, but I would put at least two above it, and mostly that would be around not feeling like we finished out the Franklin for All process. I mean, of the 10 recommendations, 11?
11.
11
There were 11.
recommendations. I think we got to 4 of them directly, maybe a few others sort of half, winked at. But the largest one, and really the first one that they put, was 40R, but really within 40R, design standards and dimensional requirements that actually make it easier to produce the type of housing that we wanted. And we said this, right? It's one thing to say, sort of from a nameplate capacity point of like, here's what could be built in this area, but if the regulations don't actually allow them to be built, then we're no closer to meeting our goals. And to me, that's exactly where we are. We're no closer or very, very little bit closer to meeting our goals because we haven't actually changed the underlying dimensional standards behind them. And so that would be my number one priority, is looking at and really addressing lot coverage, setbacks, parking requirements, stories, and design standards. That would be my number one priority. My second would be number 8, which we had talked about, is again looking at our shared parking policy. I get that this is another one that we sort of half did, and it was a huge change to change our parking requirements to, both on-street and open up those town lots. But there's a ton of opportunities still in codifying and encouraging private parking lot owners to share their parking spaces with others, especially off-hour type policies. Those are going to be very helpful, especially as we are now going to be taxing them or putting a fee on that impervious coverage through the stormwater fee. And so maybe that's even our opportunity, is putting that amongst our sort of things that, if you have a certain amount of shared parking or a certain shared parking policy, will you be exempt from some stormwater? Could that save you some funds? Something like that. But so those are my two biggest: zoning reform and shared parking. We talked, and then just to throw some others out there, and no big priority, public art. We talked about sort of a public art donation acceptance policy. I would still love to revisit that. And then as we talk about sort of encouraging the type of zoning that we want to encourage, I would love to, at the same time or really right after, talk about discouraging the types of development that we, no longer find, worth, our time and resources in town. And there are a few opportunities to do that. One is trees, and this is, something that I've been talking about with members of the planning committee, planning board, is, there are other communities that have policies around the destruction of trees, or the over destruction of trees and producing a development and having to, grow a certain number of equal trees or pay a certain amount per tree taken down. That helps us at least, slow down the sort of wide clearing of spaces for subdevelopment, which we know cost the town and hurt the sort of character that I'd like to preserve. So while we're encouraging certain types of development, I'd love to talk about discouraging others.
So I know that the Conservation Commission is thinking about a tree
policy.
tree bylaw, or tree to get more things, but it's like there were, at one of the last open space meetings I went to, hearing they spoke about that at some time, to make that part of their purview, or to work on some other bylaws for the that affect the Conservation Commission. So I think that's kind of that's sort of what they want to do. I know that. Councilor Sheridan.
Well, what is the current bylaw? Because in the old days, you drive through developments, there were trees all part of each house. Sometimes they're owned by the town. Then at some point, some towns gave them to the homeowners to take care of. But what's the current bylaw?
Yeah, we have that you have to.
Like some of these
Put-
new ones, I don't really see many trees.
We do have rules about having to put to plant trees, and then they actually just revisited, whether it's worth having them be able to pay into a pot in exchange for that. There is some that says you have to plant when you create a subdivision, but we're not as strict as many other communities.
And we're a tree city now,
We are.
right? So we
Yeah.
need to protect our trees.
Like the Lorax,
Go, tree warden,
the Lorax come back.
Lorax,
That's it?
yeah, yeah. Jamie, you had you're
Just-
pointing at me for some,
No, through you, Madam Chair, just to be the skunk at the party,
yeah,
you know, public art, I'm there, like, we've got a plan on this, we're trying to hire a director next year, like,
Yeah.
I just gotta, like, get everybody back to, I think, the goals that are here, and, like, we got 6 months, we got maybe 8 or 9 meetings, like, I just have to be, like, at least that guy that has to say, like, all these are great ideas, like, I'm a huge fan of the discussion that the CONSCOM is having about trees. Like, I love the idea. Obviously, it takes a while to get done and get through and think about it. I haven't even talked to them about it. But there's other goals that the council voted on to prioritize. And 40R and shared parking, I mean, I think we went through the 40R discussion. I mean, we're happy to do that if the EDC wants. I think that's another one of those debates. Because we had the presentation, I think the staff feel, and I'm just gonna say it, Depot Plaza is just a perfect example of something where I think going through an exercise with one builder with a 40R will give us a lot of ideas. When we set out all the rules, you're right, Council Fragile, hey, here's what we're visioning, right? And we can set out those standards if the group wants to. The downside to that is then you might drive people away. And maybe that's okay, you know, but I think when you get into the 40R piece, that's what could happen, right? And so I just want to get back onto the 4 or 5 things that are here and in the Franklin for All, which is fair, and just make sure we're just staying like within the, you know, it's part of my job because the contract I have, you know, all that stuff
I know.
intermingles. So I
It's
know
okay.
this is fun, but like we got to kind of just
I
focus.
think
Thank
what
you.
Councilor Frangillo meant is that he doesn't mean through the 40R process to do that dimensional and design standards. He means like I think it's
Oh.
attachment number 9
Yeah,
or something like that, that has all of those dimensions on it.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about
I
it
got
for a
it.
long time, right?
I
And I
misunderstood.
think there was a goal from the Franklin for All recommendation about impervious coverage
Yep.
in a couple of the zones is just like, there's just too much, like it's not needed anymore. And I believe that is what Council Frangillo is talking about. Is that?
I misunderstood.
I don't want to, I don't want to like.
I just, the point was that they said their number one priority is sort of the dimensional stuff and design standards around your downtown.
Yeah.
And they said that the best way to do that is
Is
40R. And
Right.
I'm worried
Okay, I
that
didn't-
by dismissing 40R, which I still would somewhat disagree with moving forward in that direction, but by dismissing that, we're dismissing what they actually said was, these are your top priorities are
Yeah.
actually making it easier to build. And sort of on that same topic, you know, that's really what's gonna make us MBTA zoning communities compliant. So.
Glenn?
No, Brian.
Brian, come on up.
I wanted to,
He always brings us back to reality.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Just for a minute.
We have all these grand ideas we want to
Everything
do.
talked about is great, I do.
Yeah,
On the list, you have the medical marijuana overlay,
yeah,
and that one there, first of all, really quickly, what do we need to do with that? Is it just to look at it and say whether it needs to be changed to size, or is it something totally different? So that's a conversation we can have at another EDC meeting, and the changes will likely be pretty easy to accomplish. So just put that on the back burner for a minute. I think we can accomplish something if
Okay.
we know specifically what the council's looking to do. Okay? On the home occupation, let me just take a quick. Okay. On the home occupation business bylaw, we currently do have section 18539, uses accessory to dwellings, which deals with most of those type of issues. If the council wants to define what else it wants, I'll be happy to write up the bylaws accordingly. On the 40R, we decided for a while, well, okay, had a presentation, we did, okay, that's what we put on the back burner. that was number one priority of the MAPC study. So obviously, so those three issues, I think, are things that we should be looking at. Of course, snow removal bylaw, that's something that Jamie's gonna deal with, and the 5G local permitting is something that the administration, and I'll be happy to help with that, but the administration will likely be working on that more than us. Now, so one thing I'd like to talk about is that we have, when we did the Franklin for All project, we applied for 2 grants, we got them both. All right, so we had enough money to spend $30,000 or $40,000 on implementation of those recommendations. So they were gonna be done this fiscal year, but this fiscal year, we decided, okay, we're gonna start out with inclusionary zoning, we're gonna look at the dimensional, different issues. We did them in-house, we didn't have a consultant do the work. So we're getting, the money was actually sent to the town, that $40,000 grant. We spent $30,000 of it last year. I have $30,000 I had to spend, so what I did was I talked with Barrett Planning, a company that works on planning issues, and we have a contract with them. And what they're going to do is, generally, they're gonna take a quick look at our zoning bylaw. They're going to develop a structure for a 40R smart growth bylaw. It does not mean that it will be ever passed, because the council has to agree on all these issues,
Right.
but there'll be a structure there in case the council wants to go forward with something along those lines. They're gonna do a bunch of miscellaneous zoning amendment things with me that I wanna get ready, and there's a couple of, you mentioned impervious surface, impervious coverage. It is a big deal, especially in general residential 5.
Right.
So maybe
Yep.
going forward with a really simple thing like that, it wouldn't take much at all to do just a small, one-item thing, get a bylaw done or something like that.
Look at, you're making me smile right now. I love that.
But I'm not talking about looking at every zone, I'm just talking about, I know there's a problem in that specific zone.
Right, right.
And with the other bylaws, we are going with by right, multifamily housing up to a certain scale in that zone. But if we do that with the impervious coverage the way it is, then we have a very difficult time, unless you have, they could get 700-foot, 700
Right.
square foot apartments, and that's fine, but they want anything bigger, then they wouldn't really be able to do it. So they're gonna look at, they're also going, those are the biggest things. And one of the things that they will be doing is doing the home occupation, looking at the home occupation bylaw and assessing it, comparing to what other communities have, and coming up with a recommendation on it.
I am so
those-
happy.
So
This is
those
awesome.
issues they have a contract which runs out at the last day of the fiscal year, because that's the last
Okay.
time I can pay them. So in the first half of the summer, you'll be seeing some things in front of you related to those issues, okay? So, I know that Jamie and I have been talking about, not overextending and everything, but I have a consultant doing a good chunk of work. And I think that I'm not prepared to take on anything else other than what I just talked about. But those issues there, I think we can at least move forward. And they are issues that you have in your goals, and therefore, I think it's appropriate to do those things.
Absolutely. Brian, thank you so much.
And you guys not forget, it sounds
And-
nice.
And, yeah, I mean, that's wonderful.
One thing Jamie mentioned earlier about New Style, just want to go back just a touch, is we did apply already for the $500,000 grant. That has been, and they will be announcing it over the next few months. So
Keep our
we'll
fingers,
see what happens.
keep our fingers crossed for that one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
and the other thing, we will probably put in an application for a mass development, a technical assistance grant for New Style also, because that'll be kind of a finishing work on the project if we did get the actual EPA grant.
Mhm.
Might probably need a little bit more for, planning, what the neighborhood look like and things of that nature. Because once we clean it up, we still have a property there.
Right,
going,
right.
right? So- All right, As far as all your other things, sorry, I don't want to, I just wanted to get you up to date
No.
on this. And I know that Jamie and I haven't talked a whole lot lately about a lot of stuff. We're both in and out doing 100 things, so.
Right.
But I just wanted to make sure that he knew what I was doing. And
Oh, by the way, this
He did
is-
sign the contract, by the way, but he probably didn't even, you know.
Oh, I knew exactly which one that was.
He's like Colonel Potter. He's put on
It's
a
like-
radar.
That one I don't know.
Brian, never be sorry. That
Yeah.
was all good news to me, I think, and to Counselor Frangelo as well, I
Eric,
think, right?
Can
So-
I clarify it?
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out what you're expecting for products back by early summer from Barrett. Sounded like, I think I heard 3 products, one being a 40R district draft, second being a home occupation business draft, 2 bylaw drafts, and then sort of alternative, targeted downtown dimensional improvements.
Didn't throw that one in there.
Sort of the things like impervious coverage.
Impervious coverage.
Impervious coverage in residential 5 is something
R5.
that my department would love to get done and put it
Separately.
out there for your next meeting. I mean, it's
Okay,
very
okay,
easy
okay,
to
okay.
get that done. It's a one-page bylaw amendment. We can do it. And I think if you ever want to see multifamily in the downtown or around the downtown, you have to address that one issue. There's no sense waiting until the master plan's done,
100%.
right? Just
Yep.
I think everybody, all developers know that it needs to be changed, so I think we just change that. There are some other things that are debatable, which I don't think we should get into right now, as far as other dimensional regulations and other parking this, I mean, the master plan's a great opportunity to talk about all those things. And you may get in the master plan goal, talk about this as a goal. Well, okay, maybe it doesn't get worked out and agreed to in the master plan process, but there will be a goal to discuss these certain issues. And, you know, I think that is probably the best thing to do, because there are a lot of potential changes that could happen, and we don't have the time. If we are gonna go with a master plan, we're already doing the open space recreation plan, we've got a lot of other projects, got the new style thing going. There's no way we can take on a lot of different projects all at the same time. But the things that I did mention, the things that I know we can do and we can get done fairly efficiently. When you had mentioned the 40R, and you mentioned the words associated with it, we said 40R zoning reform. Understanding that those are really 2 totally different things. 40R.
Overlay
yeah,
and a baseline.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, zoning reform, if you want to do that, that's a long-term project that, well, if my department did it, it'd be a 2-year-long thing, and I don't think we want to go there right this minute. But I don't know if we ever do. If you want a true zoning reform, top to bottom study, put it in the master plan and appropriate $250,000 worth. That's what that would entail. If you really want to do a zoning reform, which is essentially a rewrite of your zoning bylaws. You can do little tweaks here and there, which is what we do. We do incremental changes all the time, you know, and that's all we can do really without putting in major study on something like that.
Can I just say something? So I just wrote down number 1, GR5 impervious coverage. I think we all agree on that. That fits with what we've been doing in our Franklin for All process. We all know that needs to change. And then maybe we can get multifamilies downtown that we want to see. 2, the marijuana overlay district, I think you said we could probably do that. And then when the design when you get the information back from the, what is it called?
Barrett.
Barrett, then we'll talk about those things when they come up,
Sure.
right?
Fair enough.
Jamie?
Through you, Madam Chair, so just to go to the marijuana overlay for a minute, because, you know, this has been something I've pretty much worked on since the day I got here. So just to back up quickly about
So
what.
you
what-
don't, are you gonna say you don't think it's that easy?
Well, it is and it isn't. So
Yeah.
there's two pieces to this. One is, we said when we put the bylaw in, the town crafted the bylaw based on two things. One, there was clearly a business development market that was there. And I still think this is, and when the deputy comes on board, this is gonna be part of their charge about business development and some other things. I think it's still a success story that's really under the radar. The amount of tax revenue, new growth, the excise tax in the budget, jobs, careers, health insurance, all these great things that have come, big time, billionaire companies buying up properties in the industrial parks that don't even grow, their corporate headquarters are there, right? So this is like a great example of like a very, very successful business development opportunity this bylaw had, like really, really big deal, right? And hopefully at some point, we're gonna be able to get the capacity to tell these stories. When we passed the bylaw, there was one that basically the concern, as all of you remember, was don't put it downtown.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And put it in the industrial parks, and we worked around it. Since then, I think the market is generally settled out. We've got we've got retail stores up and going, we've got medical, we've got grow, we've got manufacturing, we've got kitchens, all this stuff. But there have been some property owners over the years that have said, look, we don't want this anywhere near here. And I will highlight the YMCA. There's a couple of parcels that straddle within their zone, but because of the buffer zone, can't be near there. And they kind of said over the years, like, just whenever you get a chance, can you just take away the parcels around the Y? We're not going anywhere. There's a lot of those little things that the staff can do to tweak the bylaw to shape the parcels
overlay.
that are available. Remember, a couple churches owned properties that cut areas out. So just looking at the map and the parcel by parcel is something at the staff level we can do. And even a cleanup, if you will, is like enough of something we need to do based on the market that's out there. The second issue is, now that it's been, the market is kind of settled out and there's a full regulatory compliance structure in place, the second part for the EDC and the council eventually, possibly, is really, do you want to expand anywhere else, right? Is it fine the way it is? Is a cleanup okay? And then, is there more that you want, right? Maybe so, maybe not. The legislature a couple years ago did a whole reform package that we're aware of, and I'm not suggesting you do it. I just think that maybe a little bit of a refresher on what the regs are now and some of the changes. The town has not looked at the bylaw really at all since the original bylaw went through, and I think from a staff, we'll do our own diligence, but if the EDC does not want to entertain that second issue, it's okay. I think that makes the bylaw change a lot easier because it's just a cleanup.
Right.
But if there's some more, we need to hear that feedback from the EDC and the council about what else the community might be prepared for.
Okay.
And that is the point of this goal as well.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Counselor Jones.
I mean, I would certainly love the opportunity to highlight some of the accomplishments. As you mentioned, I'd hate to see that opportunity go up in smoke. But
I knew he was gonna do
That's
that.
It was like on his face that the joke was coming.
it was coming. But in all seriousness, that was
It was
truly.
unbelievable.
It's a high priority for you.
Sorry, it's as bad as
You
my
just had to
jokes.
get it in.
Had to throw it out there. But Jamie's
We're
right.
laughing.
Jamie's right. That was quite literally a huge success story. And for many of us who've been around long enough, when these first discussions came along, Jeff, remember Tom, brought it up, saying, "This is what I see coming.
Yeah.
We should do this now before it even passed law."
Right.
And we did, and that was one of the smartest things that we did, was set it up ahead of the game, and now we're reaping the benefits because we were thinking ahead of the game, and here we are today reaping those benefits. It would be nice to have an opportunity to highlight that. I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, Jamie, in regards to kind of a cleanup and a reshuffling. Curious question I was wondering, as you just pointed out a second ago, is there a chance that, for instance, a property that was not zoned because it was a church or play school or preschool or whatever, that may have potentially, since this has been added, left, and we can now actually fill in the
Yep.
gaps?
Kenwood Circle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Yeah.
the big, that's That's one of the bigger
Yeah.
areas. There is the Amigo School now up the street on Grove, so some of those parcels have to come out. Brian, did you have any other parcels that you thought of?
Well, the charter school.
Yeah,
I mean, down
Right.
in that section of, we have, the charter school, anything within 500 feet of it cannot be utilized.
So you get like,
Right.
So there's a lot of changes. However, our bylaw and the map itself was a map of, at the moment, the way it was. But the bylaw kind of self-regulates in a way, in that if a school comes in, nobody around that school can put marijuana in there
Right.
anymore until the school goes away,
Right.
right? Or whatever the case may
or
be.
the church, yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's colored a certain thing on the map. What it is it's anything to the west and south, any industrial property west and south of 495 that is not within a certain distance of certain things,
Right.
Right,
right? So if those things go away, like this, on Kenwood, then.
It's
that-
automatically
therefore,
back in.
it automatically amends the map,
Gotcha.
essentially,
Okay.
right there.
Okay.
When the charter school came in, that's a big change in the map, but we didn't necessarily have to change the map all the time, just because it is self-regulating in a way. And there'll be other examples that were down that way, I'm sure. Like you said, the Amigo School
Right.
and others.
Counselor
The
Frangillo.
YMCA, for instance,
Oh, wait till we stop.
is, they have I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
On the YMCA, they have a daycare type
Right.
of facility.
Mm.
Therefore, nothing within 500 feet of that property can be developed. Whether it's on the map or not,
Right.
it can't be developed for a marijuana facility.
I would just say, if you're looking for direction, I would feel comfortable empowering you to come back and suggest
Okay.
small cleanups. I'm not hearing any strong demand for opening up or making use of the pot cafes that are now legal and things
Yeah.
like that. I just don't hear that demand. If there's opportunities for cleanup, I would empower you to do so. But I don't feel any, personally, don't feel any need for any radical
Yeah.
changes on that front.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
I agree too.
I think we all agree on that. Jamie?
I appreciate that, Councilor Frangillo, and one of the issues with the cleanups, Brian's right, those areas get zoned out, but the part of the problem is those property owners continue to get called. Or we get calls saying, what about that parcel? And so taking those off helps the
Okay.
property owners sometimes reduce the inquiries
The
about
stress
that.
of
And then
that, yeah.
second, I guess I would just say, like, are we good with the industrial parks? Or is there any other appetite for C2? I just want to know, because, I don't think there's a lot of opportunity, and it may not be cafes, but manufacturing or any of those other uses, or do people feel pretty comfortable with the industrial parks, the locations they're in? I'm
I
hearing.
think we're okay with
Okay, great. That's really
Right?
helpful.
Yeah.
It's kinda
That,
what I-
that helps,
that's-
because a lot of people ask all the time, like,
Yeah.
why not here? We get a lot of calls from these things, and I get a lot of calls from, seltzer manufacturers and, different, like, drivers, right? Delivery businesses. We don't allow delivery businesses to pop up. Bellingham does. There's actually a nice synergy, believe it or not, because Bellingham prohibits all of what we allow, and it's the inverse. So they benefit from one market, and we have a different market. So there's a lot of extensions. I just wanted to make sure and clarify that you were comfortable with the industrial parks and things like that, because
Councilor
If I quickly
Frangillo?
add to- I mean, this is also, like, I would very much empower you to be like, hey, you're
Okay.
missing out on this massive, like, revenue opportunity. And, this big company wants to come to town and they just
Yep.
need, like, half their lot clean. If there's opportunities like that, like, let
Okay.
us know and
All right, that's
let's
great.
talk, but.
that's really helpful. It really, this is the most discussion we've had on this in like 5 years. So, like, I've been, kind
Yeah.
of just trying to get
Yeah.
some direction,
I mean,
and this is really helpful. So
The-
this
I
is great.
feel like we're
We are.
somewhat plateauing,
plateauing, yeah.
Yeah.
amount
No
of
question.
we demand.
No question.
Yeah, and the delivery thing, I'm kind of confused about, like, they don't deliver from like Neta or something, we don't,
No, it actually has to be like another, I think that was part of the Cannabis Control Commission's
Okay.
concept of the war on drugs, was to give another section of the industry to those who had been impacted by the war on drugs. I think that that's a regulatory thing, so I think
Okay.
they're specifically, it's like a wholesaler deal with like alcohol. There has to be a middleman to be able to make that happen, so. We'll powwow as a staff and we'll come back with some recommendations.
Okay.
Much, much appreciated.
All right, great. Thank you, Jamie. All right, so we have GR1 impervious coverage, right? Then the marijuana overlay district, and then the design stuff when Brian gets that back from Barrett. And
Do we really wanna talk snow?
do we want to talk snow? I think it's one of the council's, it was a council goal, and it definitely is one that comes back every year. But I know Brutus has a map. He's changed the map a little bit, and I think we should at least see what he's done.
Yeah.
So, of course, now we have even a longer list. Right?
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, but we
Yeah.
just got an update. We know, I think the next one is the snow, because we're gonna get the updates on the bylaws that Brian mentioned later in the summer. So as I just look out over the next 5-6 months,
But he said he could do GR5 impervious coverage
oh, well, that's
quickly.
fine. That's fine. Well, that's so quick, and it's gonna go through so fast.
Well, and that's what we're
I
really,
mean,
that's what,
everybody's sitting here going,
Real
let's do it,
tough for
let's
that.
go.
I think that's
So
what
I just
I
expect
think
a
that's
rubber
what we
stamp.
really want to do. Like, that's
Right.
like the number one thing we want to get done.
That's fine,
Okay.
okay. And then you wanna do snow after that, or do you wanna wait till the fall?
I would like to do snow before
In the
the
summer?
snow comes,
Okay.
right? I
We'll
want
lay
to
'em
talk
out.
about it now, so
We'll-
that before people,
It's heated.
yeah, before it gets, before it gets cold and snowy. No, but because before people get stuck in the snow,
Yeah.
right, we have to have an idea of what we expect from people.
Right.
This is the time to do it. So, you can, whichever one you get done first, right? I mean, that's the thing, right? You
We'll
gotta
do
put
both
the
of them.
stuff together.
In one meeting.
Okay,
We can at least have the
All right.
map. I know the map's ready. I will say the snow piece will be I'm sure it'll be multiple meeting discussion.
definitely.
Because there's some odd, as you remember, like, Brutus had some pretty good numbers about, like, the concerns about downtown, but yet where we save time and money is like out here, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some
Yeah.
odd, if we're trying to
Yep.
free up DPW to do more downtown, so there's some odd cause and effect.
I think
But I think it's some
the
tough
goal
decisions.
here is to make sure that people can walk to all of the facilities and to get the stuff that they need to. They need to be
Sure.
able to get to the train station from these apartments across the street, right? They need to be able to walk down the street. They need to be able to get to the supermarket,
Yep.
right? And so I think, and to get ice cream, it's very important. But it's like to get, so people can get around to get to the things they have to get to, right? So that's kind of, I think, should be the,
Yep.
the focus of that, right?
Yeah, some of our lowest income and highest immigration populations are living up and down 140, and you see them during a snowstorm, which we were lucky to avoid this year, having to walk on 140, which is a scary place just to get to groceries. Those people do still live in Franklin. There's a growing population of people that still walk to many of their basic needs, and making sure that they are as safe as the rest of us is important.
Yeah. So I think you have do you have your list?
I'm ready to go.
You guys ready to
I
go?
wish we had the GR5 tonight. We could just do
I
it.
know, me too. That's like really exciting to me. Everything is, everything Brian said is really exciting to me. I'm very excited about this. I was gonna, you want to say something?
Could I?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing would be, there's more money than ever, both philanthropic and from the state, to redo zoning for MBTA communities. And so just making sure that we're staying aware of funding opportunities to relieve, your staff from technical assistance to redo those. I'm very confident that what we've done so far is not sufficient to meet the MBTA law. There will need to be further changes to Schedule 9. If that's too much of a task for you guys, fine, but there's a good amount of money available. So I'll just keep an eye on that.
Can I respond quickly on that?
Definitely, Brian.
So, MAPC has run the model for us, and we don't meet the numbers for a couple reasons. If we change the impervious on R5, I think that'll bring us very close right off the bat, okay?
Yeah.
One of the issues that Department of Housing and Community Development has stated is they won't accept multifamily in the downtown unless you allow it on the first floor also. We don't allow it in our zoning. So if we start saying, yeah, multifamily in our downtown core can be allowed on the first floor also, we'd be done. But
Yeah.
in my opinion,
We don't want to.
we did that for a reason.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
matter of fact, we did it at a time when the Housing and Community Development, was actually pushing mixed use, first floor, commercial
Right.
only, all these kind of things. Now they're pushing the other direction on because they have mandates to increase the amount of housing in their MBTA stations. So they're not looking at what they used to push in the past. Now they're pushing, we have to have housing near the stations, and that's fine, and we do. But I don't think we want to throw out what we've done just to make them happy necessarily. And part of my contract with Barrett Planning is to help me for a few hours on that MBTA assessment also. They're going to be looking at the issue with me and with MAPC and Amy. So hopefully we'll get it. If we don't, we'll come back with other amendments to change whatever. But I really don't think that, we have like impervious coverage, you can only have a certain amount and everything like that. In C1 that we allow like 90%, right? Okay, that's great. And if we allow 45%, say now in GR5, we're gonna be, it's hundreds more housing units that
Right.
could be developed according to the state. But in reality, it's not. Because the housing units are per square foot of a lot area, not
Yeah.
based on how much open space you have on a parcel that are required. So they're looking at, their formulas are based on what they're basing things on. And a lot of communities, including us, are saying, that's not how we do things.
Right. Right.
Our zoning bylaws are written a certain way. Look at them carefully in that way, and we would already be done. But we'll work with them, we'll get this thing done. And I think the impervious coverage is gonna get us very, very close and probably over the top very quickly. So,
Thank you,
Anyway.
Brian.
okay.
Glenn, did you have a final?
Nope.
No?
Pretty much.
Okay. All right, well, I guess I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Could we have our,
This effort for Franklin, but we can't do it alone. We can always use your help. How can you help? If you can use the information that you find here, please tell your friends and neighbors. If you don't like something here, please let me know. Through this feedback loop, we can continue to make improvements. And I thank you for listening. For additional information, please visit